Welcome to the Mars-Pluto pressure cooker.
And may the stars be with you.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Energetic Principles channel. My name is Mel LaFera and today we're going to be talking about the full moon in Aries. So just as a general disclaimer, this is a reading for the collective, so take what resonates and leave the rest because only you know you best. And of course, if you want to go more in depth with your personal astrology, that is what I'm here for. Come on over to energeticprinciples.com and you can book a personal consultation. All right, so let's talk about this full moon in Aries on Thursday, October 17th, 2024, around 4:26 a.m. Pacific time here in San Diego. And it is the Hunter's moon, and very fitting for an Aries full moon, right? The Hunter. And this is actually the biggest, the brightest, and the closest supermoon, one of 4 supermoons we've had this year. Supermoons are when they're low and large on the horizon and you're kind of taken back by like, wow, that's one heck of a moon. So I think that it's very fitting that this is the biggest. That's because it's the closest to Earth, right? We're going to feel it the most. Because this is a big and bold configuration that is going on. And so we're going to break down what this full moon looks like because there are a lot of parts. And so before we get there, let's talk a little bit about the Aries Libra polarity, because essentially a full moon is 2 signs being lit up at the same time. So when we think of Aries and we think of Libra, I tend to think of this idea of the I and the we, right? This Mars versus Venus, this just this sense of the individual and what you're driven for and your desires are as you, and then how that is in relationship with the rest of the world, right? I mean, granted, we think about relationship, I don't want to say primarily being romantic relationship, but we are in relationship with anything. However we meet things and assert ourselves with something outside of ourselves or allow ourselves to take in what is outside of ourselves, whether it's a person, an animal, a situation, an idea. This is this interrelation, the dynamic or this interconnectedness, right? And when we think about interconnectedness, this is a big theme going on, right? Because we have just pushed off of a Libra solar eclipse. So this story is building, and this full moon definitely gives us some solid building blocks. And so this is cardinal energy, right? Libra and Aries, along with Cancer and Capricorn, which we'll be talking about here a bit, is cardinal energy. This is pushing energy, initiating energy. It needs movement. It wants to move forward. When cardinal is stuck, no one's happy. Speaking as a very cardinal person myself, we have that, it's like that wave that's coming towards the shore and it's like cresting and it's like, okay, we're gonna yeah, I don't know where I was going with that analogy, but think about a wave cresting, a lot of momentum. So when we deal with polarities, sometimes we have a really hard time with integrating the other side, right? Aries needs to learn to be patient with others, patient in what is it meets, where Libra probably sometimes needs to learn about rage and anger and when it's right to take action and necessary. And so there's also these themes too, when we think of Mars and Venus, of separateness and togetherness. And once again, what I was talking about with how are we in relationship with the world? Are we with that? Or are we removed from that? And remembering that it really comes down to our responsibility in life for our individual actions, because we're all interconnected. So how we move through the world as individuals has a direct impact on the interconnectedness and even in really the collective. So remember that actions affect your world. So let's talk about the players here. And so I'm going to go into let me get my screen up here. So let's just go to the chart because I think we're going to need a visual to see all that's going on here. And so what's this pressure cooker I started the show with? Where is your pressure cooker? So I'm just gonna, let's outline this pressure cooker first so you know what I'm talking about. So this is a cardinal, let's get, I think I need to, let's see if this is gonna work. I think so. Technology, right? So here we have the sun and Juno, which I'll talk about a little bit more here, the asteroid Juno. Mars, we've got the moon and Chiron, and then we've got old Pluto, who, by the way, as I'm recording this video, is stationing direct. So, when Pluto stations direct, some of these things I'm about to talk about with Mars and Pluto in this opposition are extra pronounced, right? When a planet is stationary, its impact is on 11, right? It is turned up, its microphone is blaring, it's kind of on a megaphone. So Plutonian issues are on a megaphone right now. So let's think about this pressure cooker, right? Because here we have essentially 6 planets all forming oppositions and squares to one another in cardinal signs. So it can feel like a lot of tension is brewing. It's wanting to take action, but having these, being pitted with something outside of yourself, being in these no-win scenarios when it comes to squares. Like with squares, it's usually beneficial to take the attitude of, well, it's no one's fault. We're here because it's no one. You can't point the finger, even if you want to, because it kind of is what it is. But that doesn't mean we have to stay in the situation. So think about where this pressure cooker, as I start to talk more about this energy, is taking place in your life. So if you're cardinal rising, if you're, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, your pillars of your life are basically affected by this pressure cooker. So we're talking about your sense of self, your partnerships, how you take action in life, what's going on in your career, what's going on in your home life. So this is very active for the cardinal signs, especially if you have planets that are around this, essentially the last decan of the cardinal signs from 20 to 29. Now, if you're a fixed rising like myself, this is happening. So that we're talking Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. This is happening in your communication and perception houses. And so, the old adage is, change your mind, change your life. And so how do we move through this pressure cooker and switch up the way that we communicate, the way that we think about things, how we perceive things, if we're able to let go of certain attachments around how we believe things to be, and then how we can implement that in our daily reality. And then with the mutable risings, when we're talking about Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, this is the pressure cooker is in your space of money, in self-worth, in self-confidence, and your values in life, and then how that meets with being intimate with others or having community issues. With friendships and such. So these are the pressure cookers for essentially each of the 12 risings. So let's think more about what is going on with this configuration. All right, so Mars, look at Mars over here. Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer is ruling the moon in this chart, and our big full moon, who's just coming off that conjunction with Chiron. And so the moon is in Mars's sign, and Mars is in the moon's sign. So this is what we call mutual reception, where these planets are working together, right? They're are also what I like to call the ping pong effect. So if a planet is working together then they're just talking to one another. There's all these other planets involved, but this conversation between the moon and the Mars becomes extra because it's a game of tennis. You know, the moon says something, then Mars says something back, and vice versa. And so where do you think that leaves us emotionally and, you know, receptively? It can be very hot and bothered. You know, when we think about Mars is action, Mars is assertion, but Mars is also anger and rage and irritation and impatience. And so when we see the moon and Mars together, we know that there's probably going to be some sort of thorn in our side during this time. And no one really wants a thorn in their side, but the important thing to remember about thorns in your side is that they're there for a reason. When we are in discomfort or pain, or enraged about something, we have to bring that to the surface, because what's important to remember about emotions is that emotions are actions, right? Think about it, emotion. So emotions are energy in motion, and we're supposed to allow them to flow freely, you know, like, oh, I'm feeling this, let me move through it. And that's not always as effortless as it sounds, right? A lot of times we can get attached to that emotion, or we don't want to deal with that emotion, or that emotion gets displaced onto something else rather than dealing with it ourselves. We're going to go take it out on someone else. And so we need to allow these emotions to move freely to prevent blockages from forming, because we do have this cardinal grand cross going on. So this can be blockage energy. But we want to move through them in a way that it takes accountability, I think, for our actions. And this is where we'll probably talk more about Mars and Pluto. But just to point out, another thing that's going on here is that we have Jupiter over here making, who just recently stationed retrograde too. So we're internal about, you know, like what we're learning, what we have learned, what our belief systems are, where we're going in the future, you know, like it's not necessarily a time to move forward because Jupiter is retrograde. And so we're more in this place of contemplating what the future actually looks like within all this tension that is brewing. And so there's a flow with the sun and the moon with this Jupiter. So even though we're in all this tension with Mars and Pluto and Chiron and Juno, there is at least this like, okay, well, I know I feel this. How does this serve me going forward? And then lastly, we have Venus here, who is in a sextile to Pluto. So Venus is ruling that Sun-Juno conjunction, and they're at the last degrees of the sign. And so this speaks to also that going deep and that transformative process that needs to happen in relation to relationships, in our ability to be receptive to things and what our version of equilibrium and balance and harmony looks like. And also, once again, that sense of value. You know, what's valuable to you? Because if we're in the pressure cooker, we want to be aligned with our values so that when we do make moves or we do clear the way to be assertive in our lives, we want to be aligned with our value. So let's talk about this Mars-Pluto opposition, because this can feel like it can feel very volatile, and it's not going away. So just a disclaimer, this Mars-Pluto action, because Mars is going to station to go retrograde on December 7th, and then is going to oppose Pluto 3 times. And this is no easy energy, right? Because think about it as a volcano. This, you know, it's just a mountain peak, and it occasionally smokes here and there, and you know there's pressure underneath. But Mars and Pluto combining is now the volcano is ready to blow, so to speak. And so when we bring Mars and Pluto together, we get things such as extreme intensity, rage, eruption, purging of the past, right? Or being forced to engage with what is buried. Especially interpersonally, because we're talking about opposition. So that always brings things outside of us. We're confronted with something. It can bring up intense desires for something in life or around another. It brings up our passion. It brings up our power and the right use of it. And it's an ongoing story. So what is being lit up during this full moon is something that we're going to have to continually work through and dig deep with for a decently long time, at least through spring of 2025. And so when we think of Cancer and Capricorn, right, we think of these energies that, the Cancer is the home and the private side of ourselves where we care for ourselves and we get our basic needs, these moon related issues. Capricorn is where we're out there in the world and we're striving and we're part of the systems and the structure and we're doing what it takes to, get ours. And it can be a cold, harsh world out there versus the comfort and the warmness of our home. It's also this idea of conditional love versus unconditional love, right? Cancer is more the unconditional and Capricorn's like a little more tit for tat. Tit for tat, is that the word? So there's sort of that like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me, or I've done this for you, but you're not doing this for me. And then, so where does that leave situations? There's also this idea of the personal self versus the collective and what's going on in the world, because it is, once again, it's kind of a harsh world out there. Not always. I don't want to say that that's always the case, or we should look at the world in those eyes, because I don't think that's helping our experience here on this planet. But that can come up when we think about Saturn ruled territory. There's also this idea of being open and caring versus being more restrictive and having boundaries around something, where you're like, yes, bring it in, or no, I'm rejecting that. And so this can fit in, obviously, with what we got going on in politics, all the destruction that's going on, whether it's through wars, whether it's through, natural disasters right now, and how all this affects our well-being on, an emotional level. Because at the end of the day, Cancer is an emotional water sign ruled by the moon, and we have Mars there. So Mars stirs up. Mars is charging that sensitive area of our chart. But Mars is a warrior. Mars is about courage. It's about strength. I have this on my desk to remind me every day. Courage equals fear plus action, right? And fear can be a very Saturnian thing. It can be a very Plutonian thing. Mars is that action. We need that courage to move through, especially when we bring up once again, let's think about what is buried. Pluto has secrets. Pluto is, can submerge. It's the underworld of what you don't see. And we probably were going to need to work through some emotional gunk right now. And this might be the start of that story, or it could be a very elongated story that could be years in the making, but just hasn't been dealt with yet. Because there is a saying, and I really love this saying, and I probably need to tell myself it, being a Cancer all the time, is emotions buried alive never die. Think about that. If you're not dealing with an emotion in your life, or you're burying it down, you don't want to look at it, or you've glossed it over, it lives somewhere in the body. It causes stress. It causes disharmony that a lot of times you might not even be able to put your finger on, because it could be so buried that it becomes ambiguous in a way. But I think this secret life of buried emotions that we may or may not know about ourselves and our process can start to come up in relation to other people. People might trigger that. World situations might trigger that. And there could be this crisis point that comes up that is really an invitation to change. And so let the emotions bubble up. Have the courage to move through them. Have the patience and the compassion to feel the feels, especially in relation to other people, and not to immediately act in a way that could be harmful or destructive. If it's not well contemplated or you haven't really gone through the material yet, because this is a long ongoing story. So take your time with it, because a lot of times, think about Mars is going to begin to station and it's going to slow down. And it's important to know that sometimes the most effective way to move forward, cardinal energy, is to slow down, even when it's uncomfortable. So let's move slowly and with intention, because this is kind of a firecracker situation. And Mars and Pluto together can become very intensified and very pointed focus, like obsessive with what it is you need to do or how you need to act, or I'm so enraged by this that I must, focus all my time and energy, and my whole world exists around it. And I have another sign I have plenty of signs on my desk, but I have another sign on my desk that says, you do not exist in the world exists within you. So remember that as you look outside your own eyes, and we take this responsibility for our own actions and how we engage with life, that is your world. I just had this image of all these mirrors, right? It sounds very meta, but remember that, especially when you're so focused on something, because focus can be great when we really want to do the work. We want to change. We want to, purge all this content that is just not doing us any good. Like, it's great to be committed to the journey, right? They say the only way out is through. But doing so, we don't want to break ourselves trying to get somewhere where we're just can't get to yet, because it is a journey, right? So if you have these intense desires and to move forward on in a relationship, in a goal, on just a project, or just with your personal work, break it down. This is about showing up in discipline every day. It's not a quick win. So break the goals down into chunks so that, you're moving forward intentionally with inspired action, because that's the beauty of Mars and Aries, is it is that inspired action. And when we do that, we send a message to the universe that we are committed to this process and to seeing it through. And I think this is where we can start to talk about commitment, right? Because this is where Juno comes in. And so Juno over here, conjunct the sun. So we're having an aha moment, awareness wise, around what Juno means. And so Juno is an asteroid that is related to the goddess of marriage, and she was she is immortal, the wife of Zeus, or Jupiter, as we like to call him. And this is really about the principle of relatedness in a committed partnership of some sort. And so she has this polarity. And I will say a lot of this content is actually taken from Demetra George's book on the asteroid goddesses, which is a wonderful read. So if you're into goddesses and asteroids and adding special layers to your astrology interpretation, definitely check out that book. But this is some of the things that Demetra George talks about with Juno. And I feel like, at least in my life, and what I've observed around other people, I feel like these are very timely energies to work with. So Juno, she is, every planet has a polarity to some extent, or variations of them. And hers is about intimacy versus manipulation, right? And this idea of transforming her energy is separation and then return. And so if you know anything about Juno, or Hera, she was not very happy with the situation with Zeus. He was always out there cheating. She didn't have the intimacy that she wanted. He was having kids with other people, but she was in this committed relationship, right? It's like, how can you be in this committed situation where you're sacrificing so much of yourself for something else, but you don't feel like you're getting that in return, right? And you feel denied or frustrated for that deep commitment that you really yearn for. And so when we're not getting that deep commitment, which these are the types of, situations that Moon, Chiron, Juno, Sun, Mars, Pluto, can definitely bring up these complexes around what we're committed to, and these relationship stories can definitely be in our awareness. And so a lot of the pathologies of Juno have to do around jealousy, possessiveness, the infidelity, subjugation, manipulation, emotional power games or sexual power games, abandonment and betrayal from someone, or what we project on others or being projected on. And a lot of times these can be more the fears of those things too, right? Because we have this Mars-Pluto energy involved, and we're talking about this emotional gunk. So if we have buried emotions that are centered around some of those things, like, being betrayed or abandoned, or, like not getting your needs met, or everyone getting what you want and then you don't, like this energy is going to bring that to the surface. And same with this idea of sacrifices I was talking about. When you're committed to something, and usually we're thinking about, one-on-one partnerships, but this could be to any relationship that you're in a marriage with, so to speak, and you're sacrificing for this thing, and it's not giving you what you want back, then you can be jealous of where that they're spending their time and you're not involved, or like you're not part of that. Or there can be just resentment around, like, I have given everything that I have and I am getting nothing in return. And so there's this idea that is very Aries Libra, is, do you take it or do you fight back? So of course, it's going to be different for everyone, and can be different at different times. But these are some of the things that Juno brings to the table. There's also this idea of sacred marriage too, right? You're in a marriage partnership with yourself, and this idea of wholeness, and the yin and the yang, or the animus and the animus, and we have to bridge that marriage within ourselves that can be tense. So even if you're not in a relationship, you're always in a relationship to you. And so working through some of those situations to be in integrity with yourself can be a big part of this full moon as well. And realizing that how, who we spend our time with, relationally speaking, is what we're surrounded with. And so if we, we got to be aware of other people's thoughts and emotions and how they're operating, and have compassion and empathy for that. But at the same time, sometimes we need to sever and remove ourselves from their influence, because we can't change. We can't get the better life that we want until we are able to remove that influence. And that has to be done with compassion too. And a compassion that's really aligned with personal integrity. And so personal integrity is a big piece, I think, of this full moon, and then carrying on this situation even further. Because self-care is the motivation of Mars and Cancer. We have to move towards what is going to be best for our well-being. And I don't want to say that in like a selfish way, but that is, it is what it is. So one more thing I want to say too, just in relation to all this, is that our next new moon here on November 1st in Scorpio, which is a Mars-ruled new moon. This is when we have this back-to-back situation where we get Mars, double Mars, lots of Mars. And look at this, Mars, Pluto, Juno, T-square has now perfected, and Juno is in the middle of it. So this is an ongoing story too. So be prepared to whatever boils to the surface now is going to be an elongated story that we're going to continue to work through, and is really the lead up to that Mars retrograde that comes in early December. So, all right, well, let us go back, and I want to talk about some cards here. Not too much longer, because this is getting kind of longer than I would like it to be, but I guess there's a lot to talk about. So I pulled some tarot cards from our Tarot of Her deck with this energy for the full moon. And what was overlooking all of it was this 10 of blooms energy and just carrying the load and having to do the hard stuff and push through. And there's really no way around, like what it is you're chained to, and pushing in the burdens that we might carry. And that might be part of it too, is like as we go to make changes and deal with our intense stuff, we look at what we're carrying. Do we want to carry it? Is it ours to carry? Do we have to carry it because we need to get to the next thing and this is just a really tough situation to get through? So that's what's overlooking it. And where the full moon first takes us is this fledgling of leaves energy. And this is to me, about a lesson. It's about an end of a learning cycle. Like, I think a lot of what's coming up for us now and what we're integrating in an intellectual way is stuff that is not new. And maybe we haven't learned the lesson yet, and we still are being confronted with it because it needs to be integrated. Now, what to let go of within this full moon is this idea of justice. There it is. And how don't expect justice to show its face at this time. Things aren't going to equal out. They're not going to be in perfect order. It's not going to feel balanced. We'll get there, but this isn't the culmination that brings that story to the surface. This one is about the Five of Stems in this first quarter phase that has to do with, we have to work through and take action on losses and disappointments, and even be motivated by them, or be motivated to address our grief, and focus on what is still remaining in our lives. Because everyone loses something. Everyone loses something that their heart is invested in, or that they love, or that they thought would turn out differently. But there is always something that remains past that. And I think this really brings it on home with where the energy goes after this is this Eight of Roots, in this full moon phase, or this waxing gibbous phase. And so this is about mastering the self and focusing on the real world work that needs to be done in order to move through these losses, or difficulties, or grievances, or difficult emotions, because there's tools, there's stuff to work with from the difficulties, and it's going to help make us better people, and better in relationships, and better in our collective realities, because we're evolving as people and doing the work. So just a couple oracle prompts to work with for the energy. I really like these. Is seek, play. And so when it's intense in the world, find ways to let off steam and return to your joy, or discover what play and pleasure really mean for you, and the avenues that you can take to get those needs met. So I guess there's sort of, even though we have this intense material to get through, there is this, you don't have to sit in the muck, right? You don't have to sit in the shit. You lighten up a little bit. And then also we have this pairing of compassion with disillusion. And so if what you thought about yourself, another person, the world, cracks you into pieces, have compassion for that situation, because really, what breaks us apart is where the light gets let in. And sometimes I hear that and it makes me mad just to hear that, like, what cracks you open is going to bring the light in, and you're going to, and well, no one wants to be cracked open, but unfortunately it's true. So let yourself be cracked open with this full moon, and see where that takes you, because you don't want to live in a life of illusion. You don't want to live not your best life, going through old patterns and situations, or like keeping things under the rug that don't fully allow you to like blossom and live. Like, this is the time to have courage to confront maybe some of your deepest and darkest materials, especially when it comes to interrelatedness, so that you can live the life that you desire later on, right? So that is the goal here. All right, well, everyone, I hope this reading finds you well. And of course, if you want to talk to me more about your own astrology, because there's so many nuances to what's going on in your chart, especially with transits and progressions and other timing techniques, it can be very beneficial to have a one-on-one session. So you can book one at energeticprinciples.com, and you can also sign up for my newsletter, The Heavenly Wind. And if you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe, leave a comment below. Tell me what you're feeling on this lead up to the full moon, where it's at in your chart and what you got going on. I always love to hear it. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, leave a review so that others can know what this podcast is all about and helps me to get spread further. All right, everyone. Well, it is going to be an intense one. Buckle your seatbelts, get your whatever it is that soothes you. And most of all, I guess, just be willing to do the work. Don't shy away. Living a life that is worth living requires bravery and courage. I want that for me. I want that for you. And I think we're on the road to getting there. All right, everyone, take care out there. And as always, may the stars be with you.